Hi, and welcome to Jen's Addiction. Today I'm going to be talking about something that I've kind of had on my mind ever since I was reorganizing some of my records and record spaces the other day, and I came across them, not forgetting that I had them, but they definitely weren't front of mind as I've been really primarily listening to vinyl these days, and that would be a CD mini single or a 3-inch CD, one of these little guys right here. You might have seen them referred to as a CD single, a CD3, a mini CD. In some markets, they were also referred to as pocket singles, put them in your pocket on the go and head out. They were definitely out at a time when I think companies were really trying to figure out new ways to market music and to keep artists on the charts and expand sales. And so about 1988, these were introduced I don't want to say globally. I'm sure there were places they weren't introduced, but US, UK, Europe, Australia, Japan, they took off pretty well. I think they were marketed pretty neat. The packaging was sort of cool. And at a time when vinyl sales were starting to dip and CD sales were going up, I thought it was kind of a brilliant idea because you had a full album and then you would have a 7-inch 45 RPM single to kind of correspond with your favorite artists and things at that time. So as we're selling 5-inch CDs, what else would correspond with a CD album but one of these little guys, a CD single? There was probably a lot of ways they were marketed. The three most familiar that I was with, and in trying to research how these were packaged, which can be a challenge, I will say. When you look them up online, a lot of times you have to be real specific about your wording, or they're just going to give you 3-disc CD changers, things like that. But a lot of times they were in very slim cardboard boxes that you could put in a record store and order, just like you do now with vinyl or old CD packaging. This one had another piece attached to it that when it was sealed up, you kind of pulled that off and it did just a regular cardboard insert. I felt like when I saw these out in other places besides the ones I have, that was kind of the most popular way initially that I saw them. Another option was a cardboard gatefold, and you have to think, this is a one from The Cure. It's pretty delicate. It's starting to fall apart, but the piece where you slid in is right there. I think these that had a piece that you purposefully detached might have been better because obviously this is pretty hard to keep in one piece. And then eventually I found more that were in plastic. So this is a Skinny Puppy 3-inch for tester. You kind of open that up and you can see where the CD would go inside. So all pretty good ways to go. I think these became fragile. They were hard to keep. I mean, I'm going to sit this one down because I think I'm going to break it before too long. But not easy to store. At least these have a spine where you could read what the artist and the music was, and you had a fighting chance to store it. I found them difficult to store. Just a little history about a CD single. They were about $4 to $6 probably on average. They still were a couple bucks cheaper than a standard CD would be, which is kind of important to point out because eventually I think the fact that they were less expensive, but you got less on them was another key factor in why music companies stopped producing them. It was probably cutting into the profits for their more expensive products. They would hold about 20 to 24 minutes worth of music, so you couldn't fit a full album on here, but what you could do with that amount of time and 210 megabytes of data roughly was do a to B side style mini single, much like a 7-inch 45 RPM. So the idea being you would have your single, your main A side, and the B side would be maybe a song that you've never heard of. Typically at first, though, I think there were a lot of instrumentals. And then eventually you could add more tracks, 4 to 6 tracks, depending on length, and you would have a mini EP. And another cool thing about these was that some of them actually had video footage in them, like almost like music videos. I thought one of mine did. It's been a hot minute since I've played it, so I can't be for certain. But thought that was kind of neat that you would buy your single, you could have the video. It was sort of an extra visual tool and marketing tool, of course, to use for all of that. So they were definitely structured like a 7-inch 45 RPM, but all that extra bonus ability. So just take, for instance, if I wanted to buy this on a 12-inch, I've got 4 songs on this. I have to store it. I have to hope I have a record player to play it on. This, much smaller, right? Absolutely the same. They have the same content, the same songs on them, a little bit different packaging, of course, but way less money. And then a lot of times, though, the singles at $4 to $6. I think at the time, CDs were averaging about $10.99, maybe $12.99. So if you was an artist that you liked, but you didn't want the whole album, it was still technically a much more efficient and cheap way to buy music. But gosh, think of like the space saving, how much you could get on here. So I thought that was neat. I remember as a teenager thinking that was really kind of cool and something new. But I think in general, it was just a more advanced way to kind of push the envelope in an area that was already starting to take hold with CDs. But the downside would be that although these play in most standard CD players and CD-ROMs on your computer, where they would have that indent in the center so your disc would fit in, and there was a smaller space in the middle for a 3-inch CD, a front-loading or slot-loading CD player, especially those that you would find in cars, these did not work in. And I remember trying to put a 3-inch CD in one of those thinking, surely it'll work. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work. It just gummed everything up and made a mess. I was lucky it didn't break the player. So people just didn't want to mess with them. You could get adapters, and in some cases you would buy a larger format CD that came with the 3-inch and the adapter, but who wants to lug an adapter around? So that became a problem all on its own. So at the end of the day, you would see by the 90s, you would kind of stop seeing these. I think companies were feeling they were dipping into their profits, like I said, of bigger products. People weren't buying them as much because they were sort of difficult to store, and they couldn't easily play them as quickly as they wanted, so just buy the CD. I mean, as you know, CDs will start to go down in price. Why buy the single when I could just buy the whole album at that point, and I could put it in my car, and I could take it to my friend's house? And at the time, I think I bought these, I was high school going into college. I could take CDs just as easily. And streaming hadn't really become quite a thing yet at that point. But I think those 2 main reasons might be why a CD 3-inch sort of left the market. They did stay popular in Japan. I think the Japanese market got these in at about 1988 and stopped about 2000. And I think there were some statistics to show that even in England in the beginning, you would see from 1988 to 1989, every year the sales of just CD singles in general were just going up and up and up. And then at some point, by 2000, when apps and computer programs like Napster took hold, people didn't need CDs anymore either. So big retailers weren't even going to carry CDs. So at this point, if these had been around in this size, they probably would have been the first to go then too. So you just really saw that collapse of that whole market happen. But I think they're cool. They are online. You can order them through eBay. People do collect them. I've seen them from $1.99 up to $180. I don't really know what the value is of them, other than the fact for me, these are 3 bands I love. This is music I want to listen to. I have a time in my head and mind that I listen to these and I really enjoyed them. So, I guess if you love that idea, if you love the way they look, I think they're worth collecting. They might be inexpensive, and with the new interest in CDs, maybe this is a great way to expand a collection you already have with something that you're not familiar with. I think you'll find a lot for sale, again, in the Japanese market, possibly in Europe. American market was, again, not as hot, and there just wasn't as much for as long a period of time, 3-year window. So I hope you enjoyed a little bit of a flashback history. There might be some of you out here that might know a lot more about CD singles than I do, but I just think they're kind of cool, sort of fun. And even though I plan on still buying vinyl and 45s, if I were to find another band pop up at a record fair or a record store somewhere, for a CD 3-inch, I might be interested to give it a second look and add it to my collection. It's kind of nostalgic for me, and hopefully it is for some of you too. But on that note, hopefully you'll go out and dig for some CD singles, recheck your personal collection and see if you have some. I'm sure a few of you out there that I know probably have some even cooler ones than I do. Again, it's just all about the time and nostalgia for me. So I just really enjoyed this little mini dive into 3-inch singles. I hope you did too. Give you something to think about. Until my next addiction, you guys have a great day. Keep listening to some good tunes. Bye.